Great. I am going to unmute Jeremy and Rick to get us started.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. Hopefully everybody is safe. I know it's been a rough few weeks with the weather, so just praying for you and yours, and also the folks that you serve. So, Rick, you have anything you got?
No, just welcome. I hope everybody did okay during the winter storm. We've been raising money and trying to help people get their houses back together. So always something going on, right? Unfortunately, and with the most vulnerable folks. So welcome today, and we'll get started. Stephen, do you have anything?
Great. No, there's just a quick overview of the agenda. We will have Jeff give us his update on the eviction filings. We'll then have Renee and Cynthia give us an update on how things are going with the new rental assistance programs. We will then have a discussion and vote on the policy recommendations that were sent out yesterday. And then we will sort of pause and kind of reflect on what we have accomplished since we first got established in July. And then I think we will then talk about, build on the conversation that we had last week or 2 weeks, whatever it was, about where we go from here as the official work of the task force kind of sunsets. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff, and then we'll hear from Cynthia and Renee, and then Elaine will pick up after that.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to keep this update brief. There was a lot of concern that after the freeze, we were going to see a whipsaw in eviction case filings that we have not seen. So as you can tell, after Martin Luther King Day, we had double the filings that Tuesday, which was really just, the system being backed up and registering those filings. And we expected to see something similar. We didn't. Eviction case filings are still elevated from where they were during, say, more strict moratoria, but we're not seeing an overall higher increase, which I guess is good news. And that could also be the result of some of the interventions that have recently been put into place. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that the percent of defendants assisted by attorneys is down from where it was in Q4. It's been down throughout the first quarter of this year. This is to date yesterday, so we're just under 3% of defendants assisted by attorneys. I'm going to be running an updated CDC analysis this weekend. It just takes a while to gather the data. I was hoping to have that for y'all today. I just didn't have the computing resources to get it done. So hopefully early next week, for those of you who are interested, I can send a quick update as to how the moratorium is being enacted in Harris County. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I don't see the chat, so let me see if I can pull that up here just to make sure.
And no questions in the chat, but Zoe has a question, so I've unmuted her.
Thanks, Claire. Jeff, I'm expecting that there's going to be, or I'm assuming that there's going to be an uptick in either filings or self-eviction proceedings post-storm. We have several complexes throughout the city that we know are without running water. Do you have, going back to like the post-Harvey analysis, do you have like a sense of maybe how long that lag took to see an uptick in filings? I know it's a different type of storm and a different type of damage to properties that might, cause eviction, but how long was that lag post-Harvey, if you just know?
It's a longer lag than what we have right now. We're looking at probably somewhere between a 4 to 6 week lag. So we're going to continue to monitor this and to see if it's going to increase. Also, the short period of time that we're measuring post-freeze, which is about a week's worth of data, comes at a low point in the month for case filings. So it's not necessarily indicative of this is over and done. Case filings weren't affected, because I think you bring up a good point that it does take several weeks to get through the system, but we're going to be watching it closely. And so far, we don't see anything elevated.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm also assuming the insurance filings and people hearing back from their insurance and stuff is going to influence that as well.
Totally.
But thank you. I was just couldn't remember what the Harvey lag was like.
Yeah, that's a good question. And thank you for bringing it up.
On that front, I am curious also, is there any way that when the filing is made, that if it's not for non-payment of rent, if it's because the unit is uninhabitable, is there an indication on the filing that
There is
would
not.
allow? No.
There's a couple of ways to detect that, but really the only way to confirm is to go through the initial documents. So there's ways that we can kind of separate them out generally, like if there's a claim amount or if there's not a claim amount, but that's not a foolproof solution. So we can get approximates for that. But my hope is to do a full collection of data every month. So not just the case metadata, but all of the additional information about the case that would be necessary to answer that question.
Right.
There looks like there's a question in the chat about why attorney assistants might have gone down.
I think it's hard to know. I think that it could just be that there's the percentage is so small that moving the needle, I think, a couple dozen cases can move the needle significantly. So I think that might just be why. But it's hard to know. Was that Donna's question? I can't see the chat, sadly. So
It was Guadalupe's question for Donna as well. So I can unmute you, Donna, if you're interested in sharing any of your thoughts.
My thoughts are probably nothing that this group hasn't heard before. We have always been self-funded and have limited funding. Our attorneys are entrenched in the work itself. Our outreach ability has been really strapped in terms of human resource. I'm not surprised to see that the tenant representation is down. I don't think the county or the city or, short of Beto, who just made a generous contribution to the Eviction Defense Coalition, I'm not sure who else has an interest in tenants getting representation. So yeah, it's a very sad fact, but I'm not surprised. Having said that, we have yet to turn down any tenant who applies for legal services. We are extending representation in 100% of eligible tenants. So it's something that I'm very concerned about. I would like to think that others are concerned as well. I'm just not sure how to move the needle on that beyond what we're already doing and quite burned out at it.
And I don't see any. Oh, Curtis has a question, so I'm unmuting Curtis.
This is a question for Jeff and for Dana. Is there a value or utility and practicality in surveying tenants who are being evicted in terms of some background issues that might be relevant? That is, once we know who's being evicted, if we have information to contact them, to survey them around specific conditions. That is, were they contesting? Would they have appreciated a lawyer? Do they understand how to get to a lawyer? Did they know they couldn't afford it, or were there specific circumstances that caused them to not be able to afford it, just to begin to get a database on specifically from tenants who are on the verge of eviction or who have been evicted, what the deal was, if you will, to better understand how we might target resources for intervention.
I think that's a good question. I think Donna is muted, so I'd like to let her respond first.
Sorry, I muted myself and then I couldn't unmute again. I think that all of those are really valid questions, and I trust that there have been social studies surrounding the reasons why tenants and eligible populations in the past have not sought legal services, whether it's for housing or other family-related, child custody issues or other really dire needs, not just housing related. Having said that, I think my sense is kind of overseeing this unit that's particularly COVID eviction related. The fact that the courthouses are closed, and by that I mean not just physically closed to hearings, which is a good thing to prevent the spread of the virus, but the fact that so many of the judges are not live streaming and that our clerks don't have a virtual portal for people to check in and say, I'd like to take a number and stand in queue and talk to the clerk, or a phone number where clerks can be reached easily, really causes a problem for tenants to be able to understand where to go, when to go. And then, the very obvious point that we had reached out to a number of judges, 3 in particular, in addition to those who already participate in the universal representation or eviction right to counsel that we do offer, who simply don't want to provide this sort of right to counsel to their constituents unless there's a mandate. And so there are some courts that are providing it through citation, and there's some that don't or won't. We also know that a lot of tenants will they'll just pack up and leave at the first threat. There are a lot of reasons why, but our ability to conduct outreach, and when I say that, I don't just mean the lawyers, I mean lawyers coupled with organizers and other voices. I think government could really help in this regard to let people know that there are lawyers. Those resources have been spread very, very thin. Our ability to do outreach, coupled with our ability to actually provide representation, has been spread very thin.
I kind of wanted to piggyback off of what Donna was saying, that nationally, the Legal Service Corporation, which provides a lot of the funding for legal aid service across the country, always does a survey. And one of the surveys that they have is 86% of civil legal problems for low-income folks are not met. So meaning that it's just the resources, particularly for civil legal needs, is not there, whether it's housing, veteran benefits, healthcare or whatnot. And unlike in the criminal arena where there's dedicated funding for a criminal attorney, there isn't a dedicated funding source in the state or local government for civil legal needs. So the resources that Donna was talking about, not only the attorneys but organizers, there aren't dedicated funding for those needs.
Okay, thanks everybody. Let's go ahead and turn to Cynthia and Renee, please.
Okay, hi everyone. Renee, are you on? Do you have the PowerPoint?
I'm here, Cynthia. Claire has the PowerPoint.
Okay. Hi, Claire. Can you go ahead and
yes, I'm pulling it up now.
I will say that for the past several weeks, pre-launch and post-launch, Connective, Catholic Charities, the city, the county, Baker Ripley. Am I missing anyone, Renee? There have been many, many meetings and planning sessions to get us to where we are. And I want to thank everyone who's involved. And I know Elena's made a lot of pivots through Connective to get us up and running as soon as we have been. And many thanks then to Connective for your quick response and readiness to work with all of us. So we just want to give you an overview today of the project so far. And so Renee and I will share the presentation. I'll start out and then Renee will complete it. Next slide. Well, as you know, it's a collaboration. We're the two administering agencies, but it's guided, of course, by the city and the county working together. So happy that that has come together, and there's lots of ideas and things on the table as we move forward, but everyone's very committed to working together. We will be providing rent and utility assistance that help prevent eviction or homelessness to individuals and families who are just like the direct assistance and the rent assistance project before. They're experiencing financial hardship due to COVID-19, but there are some differences between what was and what is. Next slide. Well, and you know, I just want to say our guiding principles and our values, we have a lot of people who need help, and it's taken time, and we have, I want to say that dignity and respect of everyone coming through the system, both online and through the phones, has been uppermost in all of our minds. And we definitely are treating our employees that way, but also training them to work with people who are in high stress because of the fact that they owe back rent. So just the overview, there's $159 million that is available through HoustonHarrisHelp.org. That's kind of the name of the project. Renters can get help back as far back to April 2020 to present, with the option of having 2 months forward rent paid, which is great. We also, for those applicants, can also include past due utility bills in the assistance that we're providing. The priority, though, is tenants who are under 50% of the Houston area median. Is that family? HAMFI stands for what, Renee?
It's the Houston area median for income. It's AMI.
Right. So I just want to make sure I said it correctly. Thank you. Or 90 days of unemployment. And then, of course, there will be consideration for the monthly rent that's due per the household, and then household size. Connective is the back magic that makes it all work behind the scenes, and they're doing a great job to listen to all this, provide input, and making sure that the system itself protects client confidentiality, and then we'll randomize application and assign cases to both Baker Ripley and Catholic Charities. Baker Ripley has gone first in terms of processing applications and cases because they administered the project before us, but our team will come online next week to begin reviewing and processing applications. We've been involved working on the tenant application, working with Renee on the landlord information, and making sure that we have all the training materials ready for all the staff. Each agency has, just like we did with direct assistance, have eligibility specialists who will verify the eligibility and then approve the payment. What's different in this project is there will be 7 navigating agencies who will help people apply and then provide ongoing support for applicants as needed. So maybe they need referrals out to other nonprofits or services, need help checking up on their application once it's submitted, help in uploading all the documents, et cetera. So there are 7 navigating agencies. I'm going to tell you 5, and then Renee, if you could add in the 2 maybe that I'm missing. So it's YMCA, NAM, MAM, HAM, which is the Humble Area Assistance Ministries up in Humble, I want to say it's Sci-Hope. Do I have the name correct? And
Yes.
then there's two others that I apologize, I left my notes. So those 7 agencies will be there. I think they're finalizing contracts now. There'll be direct contracts with city, county, and those agencies will also have access to the system so that they can check on the status of applications that have been submitted. And they're not all, the contracts aren't all finalized, but they have identified, I believe, the 7 agencies. And I'm sorry, Renee, after we talked about last night, I left the complete list right on my desk.
I'm looking through my notes, so I'll come back to it.
We'll come back to that. You could change the next slide.
It's Houston Area Urban League.
Yeah.
I don't have to mention them. YMCA, the Alliance, Memorial Assistance Ministries, Northeast Assistance Ministries, Humble Area Assistance Ministries, Sci-Hope, East Harris County Empowerment
That's
Council,
it.
the Chinese Community Center, and then NAM and the YMCA also have multiple contracts with the city and the county.
So you can see it's a wide range of agencies with the goal of reaching out and providing access to a wide range of tenants. So maybe there's more than 7, but more than 7 locations for sure. So we're excited about that, the opportunity to work with all of them. And they will also help, again, as I said, with outreach into the community and to their client bases, but also to the community at large. They'll help with tenants with applying, and then can help refer them to other community resources. And in terms of eligibility, you can see them there. I don't need to read them all to you, but first and foremost, they have to be a resident of either Houston or Harris County, meet the income guidelines. They have to be able to demonstrate financial impact of COVID and are currently experiencing housing instability or risk of homelessness. So we want to prevent them having to go through the eviction process, if at all possible, by bringing them current in their back rent and then hopefully being able to pay 2 months ahead. Next slide. The process. So Houston Harris Health is the website. If you haven't been there, please do visit it. Tenants can encourage their landlord to register and enroll there. The tenant themselves will submit the application for help through the website. Then they go into the portal and select the landlord. And then the landlord registration is a direct assistance option if available, or if the landlord fails to respond. I'm going to turn it over to Renee now, and he's going to talk to you more about the landlord process, and then we'll kind of be happy to answer any questions.
All right, next slide, please, Claire. Hello, everyone. As mentioned, I'll go over a little bit over the landlord enrollment. Right now, we have over 18,000 landlord locations that have been enrolled. I want to double check that number again. I've been looking at a lot of numbers lately, so I'll get back to y'all. But it is an extensive number of landlord locations that have enrolled. And since kicking off in 2021, we've actually received new enrollments from landlords. So some of the work that's been done in the landlord requirements, I think, has changed. And again, because we're so further along on this pandemic, almost a year now, I think just landlords recognize that this rental assistance is important for their tenants. So landlords who participated in 2020 could continue participation in 2021. We did send them an email letting them know what are the new terms and conditions, which I'll review as well right now with you all. But they received the new terms and conditions, and they were given the option to opt out, or if they just felt okay, they could stay in. And many did. We haven't had a lot of reports yet of landlords opting out. Landlord registration for new landlords was available on February 18th. So we've had now several weeks where landlords have been able to come on board, and they have. Like I said, there's been a number of landlords. I think we're approaching close to 2,000 landlords who did not participate in 2020 that are interested in participating in 2021. One important thing in 2021, the legislation, the funding does allow for a tenant to apply for a program and apply for assistance if their landlord is not participating. And that went live today. So as of today, the tenants who don't have landlords, participating landlords in the systems, they can still submit their application. Now that process is driven a lot by legislation. So we have to follow that process, which basically says that we have to try within 21 days and a number of notifications to landlords to try to get the landlords enrolled. If the landlord does not become enrolled within those periods and after that activity, then we can go ahead and pay the tenant directly for the rental assistance. And then Connective, again, great partner with us, has been doing some wonderful work in figuring out additional system enhancements that will benefit both the landlord and the tenant. We have some things coming online in mid-March. We have some other things coming online at the end of March. One thing will be the landlord portal, and another one will be the tenants will be able to see the status of their applications there. And Elena is pointing out that it's no longer 21 days. We received clarification that we could do the payments to the tenants after 10 days. So we do need to update this slide. Thanks, Elena, for that. All right, next slide, Claire. So what do landlords agree to in this new 2021 program? Like in many of these resemble the terms and conditions of 2020. They have to give the tenant credit for any partial payments. So if the tenant did apply 10, 20, 30%, whatever it may be of their rent, that credit is there and the landlord has to recognize that. They have to waive all late fees, all penalties, and all interests related to past due rent. They cannot pursue enforcement of any judgments, writ of possessions, or other litigation until a final decision is made on the tenant's application. So when a tenant applies, we do notify the landlord and they have to put a hold on that. They must rescind or cancel any prior notice to vacate and dismiss any eviction suit once the tenant's application is approved and once payment is made. And they have to refrain from issuing a notice to vacate, initiating an eviction proceeding, or any other item as noted in the CDC nationwide eviction moratorium. Next slide, please. So one thing that's very important that's even in the federal legislation in 2021 is this idea of DOB, or duplication of benefits, because there's multiple sources of funding out there. Right now we have the cities and the counties joint rental assistance program. There is the statewide $1.2 billion rental assistance program. And then you have some other local funds like the TRAP, the Texas Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So because of that, landlords, at least through our program, and I'm sure through all the others, are informed that they will not and should not accept multiple payments from different funding streams for the same months. So it puts a lot of the responsibility on the landlord, but also us as administrators are watching this very carefully and running a lot of reports to try to identify the potential for duplication of benefits. We have talked to landlords and in constant communication with them and telling them how to avoid these duplication of benefits. If they're receiving notifications from multiple programs, at that point, they need to notify us. If a payment's in process and hasn't been received, but they know it'll be for a duplicate payment for the same month, they can notify us. Or if the payment does go through, they have to return it to us. Okay, next slide. Before I go to where we are today in status, are there any questions about the program design for Cynthia on the tenant side or for me on the landlord side?
We do have a few questions in the chat. One's a clarification of if the 2,000 was new landlord holding companies, 2,000 properties, or 2,000 new units that registered for assistance.
We don't count units. So when you see our numbers, those are all locations. So they're individual locations. Where it gets a little tricky is like where you have some townhomes that are maybe right next to each other and they're renting all 3 townhomes. Those would be 3 locations, for example. But just similarly, a multifamily, with 200 or 300 units could be a location itself. So that is landlord locations that a tenant can associate. Okay, that's where I live. This is where I'm going to attach my application to this.
And then is a tenant considered to have applied when they filed the request or when they're selected as a participant?
Are they considered to have applied when they, no, when they consider to have been applied is when they submit their application. So the minute that they submit their application, it's tied to the landlord location. The landlord gets the notification of the tenant that the tenant has applied for services.
And then the final question I have in the chat is from Mary. She thought the federal legislation allowed landlords to apply even if tenants didn't. Is that a possibility?
Yes, yes. And it's the two-step process where landlords enroll and become participating landlords, and then the tenants apply based on their eligibility. So yes, the purpose of opening it up on February 18th was so that landlords could go ahead and start enrolling and listing themselves as participating landlords even before tenants applied. Okay. So real quick, I will share where we are today. Can I have access to share? Claire? All right. Can you see my screen yet?
Not yet.
There's Renee, there's a couple of other questions in the chat. One is the immigrant status, where the direct payment could go to the tenant because the landlord chose not to register for some reason. The guidance that we've received is that the tenant in those cases would have to have legal status.
Correct.
And that came from the direction we got. I'll try to screen share. The other question that came up was, does the landlord requirement to refrain from filing notice to vacate apply to all tenants in the building or just the tenants who's applied? And I think it would be just the tenant, correct?
That is correct. In 2021, the city did have it where it applied to everybody in the building. In 2021, the terms and conditions only applied to those who apply and those who receive payment. Can you see my screen now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the number of applications that we've received. Some of these applications came in 2020 because we did leave the application process open during that time. And then additional applications have come in when we opened up the new Houston Harris help.org website. So this is as of this morning. We have close to 30,000 applications that we've received and they have requested close to $103 million in rental assistance. The requests for rental assistance are larger now because there's no cap on what we can pay per month. And two, this goes back to April and it could be all the months that tenants still owe. And three, it allows for up to 2 months of future rent. So the amounts per application are averaging about $3,400 per household applicant. So that's where we are, close to 30,000 applications, over 102 million. As Cynthia mentioned, we had the wait list, so we were able to get started a little bit sooner than Catholic Charities, and they're coming online next week. But we've already selected for processing close to $11 million worth of applications. This week was our first payment processing, and it was close to 200,000. And I believe we're going to get to where we're processing close to $1 million per day in payments from here on out, because we're now fully ramped and we're reviewing all those documents and stuff. I also anticipate that a large amount of this 102 million might drop off. What we've experienced in previous rounds is about 50 to 60% of what we receive ultimately become eligible, provide the documentations, and we're able to process them. So at least for now, we can count on that. We know we have about $50 million, at least $50 million worth of applications that we know will end up getting paid. There might be more down the road. More applications will continue to come in, but it's a good sign of where we are today. Any questions?
There are two more questions in the chat. One, does a property have to be under FMR or require inspections?
The inspections, let me address that one first. The inspections is not a requirement under the Treasury funds that we have. The inspections are a requirement under the TRAP dollars, which is the Texas Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The TRAP dollars does have that required inspection if you offer 3 months worth of future rent. So there's some policy decisions that are being made on that funding source to try to not require those inspections. The property does not have to be, I'm gonna maybe lean on Elaine on this one to make sure I get this question right. But we are using FMR as a prioritization. We're looking at the rents amounts to figure out how to prioritize vulnerable populations, but it's not a limit in terms of payments. Elena, do you want to chime in? Did I say that correctly?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. So just as a prioritization, so if they're under FMR, they may be at process. They'll be some of the ones selected first, but it's not a requirement, and we expect hopefully the whole queue to be able to be processed.
Thank you. Mary's question, is there a way for landlord to apply on behalf of the tenant? No, absolutely not. The landlord can enroll on their own and become a participating landlord, so all their tenants can apply and tie their applications to that landlord. But the tenant has to be the one that applies for assistance. They're the ones that need to provide the documentation. They're the ones that need to provide the certifications and so forth. The reason why we don't allow the landlords to apply is a potential for internal controls, since the landlord is the one receiving payment. So there's already been some cases in Fort Bend, for example, where landlords have fraudulently submitted their applications for their tenants without the tenant's knowledge and have received payment that was not, where the tenant didn't even have a past due amount. So there is some internal controls reasons why we don't allow that.
And then Diana had a question about speaking a bit more to the ramp up and what it would take to get this to scale.
Well, fortunately, we have Catholic Charities as well as a partner here. So they're here to help us with their experience in these programs to expand capacity. So we're very grateful for them to come in online and joining us in this effort. So we have two organizations. Between the two of us, we're ramping up all our staff. For us, we did hire additional staff, and we're in the process of training them so that we could have maximum output, maximum production to get these funds out quickly. The funds do expire on December of 2021 at the end of this calendar year, but by no means is either Baker Ripley or Catholic Charities prolonging this. We know that folks need money now, need the assistance now, and we're trying to get that money out sooner rather than later.
And then just one final question was just around where tenants should report any concerns of fraud. Should that be to you all?
Yeah, there's two places. Well, there's actually three places. They can report it to Baker Ripley or Catholic Charities. And there is a COVID-19 fraud hotline that's set up nationally that they can report that to. And we're going to start putting that information out as we work with the navigating agencies. That'll be included in the information packets that they share.
So I just want to address the issue of direct payments to tenants. It's the same that it was with the direct assistance through the Harris County. We were not allowed to provide direct payments to people without legal status, that 61 million. And it has to do with the fact it's paid directly to the individual versus going through the vendor. We definitely understand the concern. It has been raised several times in our meetings, but the direction really came from the government on this issue. And that's where really the final decision rested. So I just want to say it's not that we didn't take the recommendation of the work group and this body very seriously. I mean, we're all committed to helping out our immigrant brothers and sisters who live in the community, but if it's a direct payment, it's considered different, and therefore direct payments can't only go to people with some sort of legal status.
Great. I think that is all the questions I see in the chat.
Okay. Thank you, Claire. So hello, task force members. I really hope, and everyone on the call, that you all are okay, that you have water back, and that you did not, suffer that much. I know we all experienced disruption in these past few weeks. And we have one more vote from the group of the policy response team, which met the Friday before the storm. It was our last meeting, so we want to bring the recommendations that were shared with you all before to a vote. I'm going to read through them really quickly as a refresher for the group. So the policy response team was convened to review a policy and programmatic national scan that looked at tenant protections, financial support, legal support, housing support, and outreach and public education. We met 4 times and evaluated over 26 policies and programs that had been implemented in cities, counties, and states across the country to determine which were more relevant to our context and which would best address our housing stability issues locally. Based on these policy scan, the shared experiences from work group members and the expertise, we settled on 9 recommendations to the city of Houston and Harris County, and 5 recommendations that would need to be considered at the Texas state level. First of all, I really want to thank the 11 work group members that were very active in this process, and because I think we were able to garner support for many important policies. On short-term local policy program recommendations, 78% of the group members that voted on the form supported the adopt a set of standards for the implementation of the CDC order in Harris County to address documented issues. Everyone agreed that the JP court should have some type of standardized process on how to implement federally declared orders. And then the number 2 was, during our meeting, separated as an individual note to make that in any emergency setting or instances like a pandemic in which defendants are not able to attend court, that all justice of peace courts should live stream eviction cases and to establish access to the court standards to support uniformity on all the courts. Number 3, 88% of the group supported to pilot a local eviction prevention program to explore the provision of integrated services that address housing stability issues, as opposed to a diversion program or a mitigation program to come more upstream to address several issues. Number 4, to build on the Way Home eviction diversion programming to initiate a local program that provides residential assistance to families in transition. Such a program would address housing stability by providing short-term financial assistance to households that experience a one-time crisis. And there are a few details under every of these policies. Number 5, 78% of the group supported to enact a grace period to pay rent under ordinance to be activated during emergency declarations. We discussed that currently there's a 3-day grace period to pay rent, and that should be expanded to a minimum of 14 days before late fees are assessed or a notice to vacate is submitted by the landlord. For the long-term local policy and program recommendations, There was 100% of support to prioritize the development of an outreach and community engagement strategy around all housing stability initiatives and set aside funds to leverage the human resources needed to implement such strategy. We really dove into some recommendations that had been discussed as part of this task force in the past few months and as part of other work group conversations to support a really comprehensive community engagement strategy. Number two, 100% of the group supported the establishment of a local affordable housing trust fund or stabilization fund. Both the city of Houston and Harris County should prioritize the development of this type of fund to support housing stability and the production and preservation of affordable housing units. And then there's some considerations that local jurisdictions can take in the development and administration of these funds. Number three, 78% of support to establish a right to counsel ordinance to provide the defendant with the right to have a lawyer assist in their defense when they don't have the means or resources to pay for an attorney, as we were discussing at the beginning of this meeting. Number four, we had 55.5% of support with an 11% abstain to adopt a tenant's right or opportunity to purchase ordinance. These will provide tenants, cities, and nonprofits the right to purchase government-assisted multifamily units when the owner decides to sell the property or exit the affordable housing program or convert the rent to market. And then for the state and policy program recommendations, 100% of support to establish a tenant's right to redemption law that allows tenants in non-payment of rent proceedings to pay all rent due and associated costs into the court registry before a writ of petition is issued and be able to automatically end or dismiss the proceeding. 89% of support to establish a sealing of eviction records law to call justice of peace courts to seal eviction filings until an eviction judgment is achieved in order to remove inaccurate information from tenants' records and to automatically seal eviction records after 3 years to mitigate the collateral and long-term damage evictions having tenants' life and prevent housing discriminatory practices. 89% of the group supported the establishment of a warranty of habitability law in the property code by adding specific list of requirements to be met in what is considered a habitable unit, in addition to hot water supply, locks, and working smoke detectors. Number four, 78% of the group supported to extend temperature-based moratoriums and moratoriums to utility shutoff protections from elderly and critical care customers to additional vulnerable populations, including families with children and those who receive public benefits. There are some states and cities that have these added vulnerable populations in the policies, but Texas only protects the elderly and critical care customers. Number five, 67% of support to reduce the standard late fee cap percentages from 10% to 5% during emergency declarations. And this is the list of the active policy response team members. If any of you want to share something else before we take a vote on the chat, but if not, we will call for a vote. If you support these recommendations, yes or no, we'll take document of the votes, all the votes, and if anyone is not in attendance, we'll get their vote after the meeting. Thank you. And please, if anyone from the policy response team wants to share anything, you're welcome to.
So maybe Elaine, as people are voting, if no one has any questions, why don't we just go ahead and pivot to your, oh wait, there is. Yes, so Margaret, the answer is yes, we are. But if something advanced on the, even if it did not have 100% from the working group, it passed the 2/3, so it's included in the package of recommendations, and it's a straight up or down vote on the package of recommendations. Claire, if you can unmute Elaine.
Yeah, I wanted to say that we consider much other policies, and during our last meeting, so these votes are from the votes from the before the last meeting, but in the last meeting, everyone that was present supported more than 2/3. So we didn't include any of the policies that did not have more than 2/3 support from the group. And the one abstain was an okay in the last meeting. I should have corrected that after the last meeting.
And it looks like Curtis has a question or comment.
Yes, it was answered, and that was the issue about a la carte voting on things that fell below 2/3. But Elaine answered that. It was an abstention that drove that to the 63%, as I understood her.
Okay, so Elaine, you want to go ahead and sort of do the deck. So, and welcome Representative Wally, who has joined us. Are you okay for probably now about 10 minutes more, Representative, or if you're short on time, we can let you jump in before you need to doc. Okay, you're good. Okay, so Elaine, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, I'll do it fast. Oh, sorry, let me share my screen first before I. Okay. Okay, so can someone nod if you see my screen? Okay, perfect. So we just wanted to do a recount of our work together and what we have accomplished till now. So we had 3 main work streams: the immediate requests, the work groups, and building our base knowledge. For immediate requests, we submitted 5 rapid response sets of recommendations, starting with the grace period ordinance in July, and the last one we did was in January with the recommendations for the local implementation of the Recovery and Relief Fund for the rent assistance program. You all will receive these timelines after the meeting. We developed 6 sets of recommendations through work groups starting September and completing it today if the policy recommendations are approved. There we had the web-based resource for renters assistance proposal, tenant landlord facilitation pilot concept, rent assistance work group recommendations, access to justice, small landlord and property stabilization, and the policy recommendations. And then we met 15 times bi-weekly with all task force members. We had 10 reports from January advisors on eviction filings and data reports, 8 reports from local programs that included Baker Ridley Catholic Charities and from the Texas Diversion Program with Dana and Howard. And then we had 12 subject matter experts presentations, and we are listing in this timeline all those presentations that we hosted during these past few months. All these set of recommendations will be packaged in a final report format, which you will have the opportunity to review. The report will be sent to task force members, city, county representatives via email, and will be published on our website as well. You all have access and can share meetings and recommendations at housingstabilitytaskforce.org. If anyone has trouble navigating that website, please let us know. But you should be able to click, and then all the PDFs should pop off, and all of our meetings are there. We want to thank all of the task force members for your commitment and participation to do all this work. We want to especially thank all the task force members and non-task force members that joined work groups. Some of you joined more than one. We also want to thank our quantitative and qualitative data supports. That includes January advisors, Connective, Rice, Kinder, and Texas Policy Lab. And we are now going to open it for some reflections from leadership, the co-chairs, Armando and Stephen. Thank you.
So I'll be happy to start, and then Rick and Jeremy and Armando. First, just want to acknowledge and thank everybody for what we've collectively accomplished. We've accomplished a lot, I think, in terms of agreement from a very diverse set of stakeholders for what I think it looks like. I haven't done the final math, but it looks like the policy recommendations have gotten 2/3. So assuming that that does, we would have had a broad set of recommendations for both policy and practice. And I really think that none of that would have happened if everyone had not really participated, listened to one another, considered one another's perspective, and deliberated in good faith. And so I hope we can all stop and pause and just celebrate what we've accomplished together in that regard. Second is that, I think this is a space where it was an important step that we took on what is really a long journey that has got to continue. I think that we've developed some really solid recommendations, and if those are implemented, those will likely have a long-term impact on the lives of both renters and property owners. And not all of the things here are going to generate any quick wins, but change, as everyone on this on the task force knows, takes a long time. And I think that the fact that we all got together and really tried to envision what a better situation could look like for our region is instructive. So as Elaine mentioned, we have sent the recommendations thus far to the city and the county leadership. And on the policy recommendations, we'll be delivering those, again, assuming that they are finalized, which appears to a combination of the city, county, and to Representative Wally, for particularly those that are relevant at the state level. And then creating the PDF report that everyone will receive and can access, and then hopefully circulate. And I think it's fair to say that we've already seen that that those have been put to use, which I think is exciting. I think certainly Renee and Cynthia can weigh in with how the rental assistance working group recommendations helped inform and shape the rental assistance program that they just described to us. And if others want to also talk about how they've been useful, that would be great. And we encourage people to use them and continue to build on them as you think about what to do with the work that we've collectively produced. In just a minute, Dara Manashi, who is a consultant that has been a part of the consulting team, is going to facilitate the conversation about where the group goes from here. And I think we heard some of that last time, and we've continued to reflect on it. And I think we've outlined, at least framed some things that hopefully will be helpful for folks. And I just, as sort of from my vantage point, having recently relocated back to Houston, I just really want to reflect back how encouraged I was and have been and continue to be at the dedication that people have exhibited throughout this process, and the real seriousness of purpose which people have. I mean, I think one of the things that we had identified was that we would know whether or not people were finding it valuable by whether or not people showed up. And as Elaine said, week in and week out, amidst people that have extremely busy schedules, people were taking 2 hours to get on the full task force meeting, and extraordinary participation in the working groups as well. Next, let me just say, in terms of the thanks that I have for the support, certainly, our co-chairs, Rick and Jeremy, put in an extraordinary amount of time above and beyond, and were always available. And there were plenty of times when that commanded a great deal of their attention over and above their regular jobs. The team of consultants that have helped, Dara, who you'll spend a little bit of time with, but as you all know, the working groups and much of the structure of these, and the facilitation pilot that was generously funded by the Greater Houston Community Foundation and United Way, the task force that Martha McCrease and Jeff Stive really led that group of consultants. On the staffing side, the behind the scenes wizard to always make sure that agendas went out, minutes were done, recordings were made, votes were recorded, etc. Zoom calls were done, presentations. Claire just has been extraordinarily helpful as a partner, and I can't even imagine that we would have been able to do a fraction of what we've done without Elaine. Elaine just has devoted herself above and beyond what the number of hours that she has put in, the creativity, the dedication, the follow-up. It has just been nothing short of remarkable and extraordinary. And I dare say, if there's one single person upon whom much of the work of this task force has really been facilitated and accomplished, it's really because of Elaine. So special thanks to her. Last, as I turn it over to Representative Wally, I'd be remiss if I did not thank Rachel on his staff, because when we were first conceptualizing this as a possible task force to come into existence, I'd say Rachel really was the one that ran all of the traps and made sure that it was teed up both for Representative Wally and then the counterparts at the city. So special thanks to Rachel and all of the staff as well. So with that, I'll certainly turn it over to Rick, Jeremy, and Representative Wally.
Representative Wally, you want to go ahead?
No, y'all go ahead. I'll back clean up.
Okay. Well, let me start then. I won't make this will be short and sweet. I want to thank everybody for their involvement. When you bring a group of really interesting people with diverse views and diverse backgrounds into a debate like this, it really creates value for everyone, because we learn from each other. I learned a whole lot about the legal processes and housing stability issues and things like that I didn't know in the past. And I'm better for participating in this group. I think we did accomplish some major things. The program details that the city and the county are using now are recommendations. The fact that the city and the county are cooperating together in a joint program came from us, and we pressed really hard on that, and I appreciate all the pressing. The city ultimately put in a grace period ordinance too. I know it was frustrating for a lot of folks at times when the political process got messy and we had the city pull out and all that, but that's just part of the political / community support process. And what you have to do is power through it and get the best result that you can. And I think we did. And I appreciate all the hard work and the energy that everybody put into that. So thanks. Jeremy?
Thank you, Rick. I want to echo the comments of Rick and Stephen, and just thank you all for participating in this process. I too learned a lot from the landlord's perspective, right? And that things tend to be complicated, both from a landlord and tenant perspective, and from a programmatic perspective, dealing with levels of government, dealing with everything else. And so I appreciate the wide range of knowledge that assembled. And quite frankly, we had a little conflict, particularly with the city amongst one another, but conflict is good, right? Particularly constructive conflict, and without conflict, you aren't able to push forward, right? If we were all able to agree with one another, we'll still be in a time. Well, I'm not going to go there, Friday. So I would say this: that thank you all for everything. Thank you, Representative Wiley, and the city and the county for allowing us to participate in this process. So, with that being said, I'll kick it to Representative Wiley.
Well, thanks, Judge Brown, and thanks, Rick, for co-chairing this group. Obviously, we had a lot of diverse on the task force, and I think that probably leads to a better product. And I want to thank Stephen and your team, Elaine, Claire, all these folks that put in the work to administratively get all of us and you guys together, and Rachel on my staff worked extremely hard on this project with the county judge's office and Judge Hidalgo and and the rest of commissioner support. I do want to thank them for giving me a platform to try to help steer particularly the city and the county's efforts. Marvin has been good to work with. Obviously we had, let's just be frank, they pulled out. I was disappointed in that, but I don't think that stopped the work that you guys did, right? And ultimately, I think steps were made in the right direction. The city and the county in years past, and Rick and most of the folks that know the city and county, how to work, there were times that they, historically been at odds with each other. And I think this regime under Mayor and Judge Hidalgo's leadership, look, sometimes they don't agree, right? And that's fine. But by and large, they've been pretty good. Just my interactions with both of them have been good because they've been on the same page, trying to get folks, let alone relief efforts or recovery efforts. We're still in a pandemic, right? So whether a mask order is lifted or not, that's unfortunate too, does put some strains on us locally, right? But from a response perspective, they've both been pretty, spot on. And I appreciate my discussions with the mayor, my discussions with the judge, and my reporting back to both of them on these issues. And so I think we tried to set the tone, Marvin and I, at the beginning about the city and the county's collaboration. I continue to have that philosophy, and I believe in it, to be honest with you. I've worked with both of them, worked with the mayor as a member of the legislature, but now working intimately with the county government. It's been an eye-opening experience for me as well, experiencing county government and having to be over there a lot. But my conversations with each of you have been good. I've learned a lot. And so I hope this is not the end, to be honest with you. I know there'll be a report that will be issued and will be sent. I hope this collaboration at some point maybe morphs into other efforts. Quite frankly, I have a package of bills that is leading off, and some of you may or may not like them, and we can talk about that. But I have a series of bills that's coming out of this committee, right? Coming out of recommendations for many of you. And I want to learn if I'm on the right track or if I'm not, right? I want to be sensitive to those folks that might be impacted negatively. But my goal, and I'll just tell you moving forward, now that the legislature is in full swing, my goal is always about the people, right? So my interest is always to help people move forward. And if y'all have policy recommendations to help my bills get better, I'm open to that, right? But I'm certainly know that this process in the legislature, can get a little heated. But just know from my perspective, I'm gonna come, I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna try to bring people together, stakeholders together to get these things done. But at the end of the day, I just want y'all to know where I come from on these things. So, I have a HB 531, it's a tenant notice, a floodplain bill. I have HB 1647, eviction record sealing bill. I have HB 1930, it's a better reporting on evictions with the OCA. I have HB 1931, banning sources of income and discrimination in public facility corporation housing projects. So, and that's just the first tranche of bills. So, really appreciate all of you guys. It means a lot to me as a Houstonian that you guys were willing to, as Stephen said, take a lot of your time on this task force. And again, I hope that this is not the end, but a facilitation of future, and I don't know how many of you guys actually have met before, or if y'all have ever worked together before. I know, there's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of players in this arena, but to the extent that industry, government, and advocates can work together, I'm proud of you guys. What happens in the legislature right now is going to get a little, difficult here real soon, but I appreciate all of your time and your effort. I can answer any questions about the legislature, about what's going on. I can give you a quick briefing on that, but right now the legislature is starting to pick up, even though we have COVID protocols. I know folks want to come visit us. My policy has been that, my door's locked. We got a lot of crazy people out there that don't want to wear masks and don't want to get tested and stuff like that. So to protect my own staff that are young folks, I have some interns from Rice, interns from Hobby School, interns from Texas State, and my staff, Rahul, Srinivasan, and Rachel. They've been with me for a while. Rachel's been with me a couple sessions, worked hard for us. And so, I'm sitting on the appropriations committee. I'm a subcommittee chair, so I don't want to put too much into this right now, only to say this, that, it'd be favorable to be, I'd be favorable member to serve on the conference committee to the budget again. And also recently been appointed to the Legislative Budget Board by the Speaker. That's a group of 10 members of the House and the Senate that actually will write the bill prior to session and does a lot of budget execution when the session is gone and things like this, pandemics happen and we have to expend resources from the state perspective. So I'll stop there. I'm really proud of all of you guys, to be honest with you. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to the judge. It means a lot to the mayor that, folks are willing to, get to work. And, it doesn't really matter who takes the credit, right? It's the work product and it's the people that matter that benefit from this process. So I'll stop there. I'll answer any questions that you guys might have. Hearing none, chair hears none.
All right.
Okay, Dara, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you again, Representative Wally. And I think that's probably the first time we've ever heard a legislator say, not my door is always open, but my door is locked. So
you can, my door's open theoretically in other ways.
Fair enough.
The door is locked.
Just have to knock. So thank you all. When Stephen asked me to do this, and I was happy to participate, it really came about because we could actually just decide that this task force has done its work and we're done and it's time to move on. But there were so many of you that want the work to continue. So while the workforce is not going to, that task force is not going to continue, we want to have that conversation about how this group or parts of this group or subsets of this group want to take the work that everyone's been working on and move it forward. So within that context, and I'm not sure if it's Elaine or Claire, having had conversations with all of you, we really came up with sort of 4 options about what we could do next. And what we thought we would do is sort of just go through those really quickly, have a really quick vote to get the temperature of the group, and then use that to focus a conversation that this group can have, and then have another vote sort of where we want to go. And in the end of that, we're going to sort of take up all these notes and send them out to you. And you all are going to decide what you want to take up, what you don't want to take up. We understand that there's a lot going on, so it might not be right now. It might be in 3 months. It might be in 2 months. But we want to try and seed as much of that as possible before LISC steps away in its administrative role. So within that context, and Elaine, the screen is fine. We've got 4 options. I'm going to read the options, and I'm going to let you guys just sort of glance through what we think needs to actually happen if in fact that option gets taken. So the first one really is the task force advocates the recommendations on their own. The task, we're done as a task force, and everyone as an individual can take the recommendations or pieces and parts of it, advocate it, do what you want with it. That's what you do. The task force is also, option 2 is that this task force and the people at LISC are willing to get this group together once a quarter and not have the formal agenda and doing all the work ahead of time and that kind of thing, but rather use it as an opportunity to share information, which has been very helpful in terms of data sharing and those kinds of things. Happy to do that. The third option, and Elaine, you want to go down the next page, is that any of the subgroups or work groups want to get together on a specific cause. That's something else people have put out there on the table. But it's really clear that if that's going to happen, someone needs to take up a leadership role to figure out how to organize it, keep the agendas going, all those not so much fun but necessary back office kind of things. And then the fourth option is really that if there's another organization, group of organizations, individuals who want to take up the role of this task force and have the resources to do it, that's another option. And we could see if people want to continue it. Again, maybe not at this pace, but those are basically the 4 options that, again, having talked to you guys, that we were able to discern from those conversations. So in order to focus the next sort of 20-minute conversation, 20 minutes, half an hour, we thought it would make sense, given those 4 options, take a quick vote. Which ones do you guys want to talk about? And that'll be done in the chat, correct, Elaine? Renee, it's talk about what do you guys want to be the focus of this conversation that we're going to have over the next half hour? At the end of it, we'll have a vote in terms of what people want to do. But for now, it's really to focus the conversation. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, let people put their sort of opinions out there. right. Well, it seems that there's a grand consensus about nothing, so that's what will to be expected. Yeah, so I thought maybe the best way to do this, there are a couple of people that want to just declare victory and say we're done. And if anyone wants to jump in, I believe what Claire has done is unmuted. Anyone can unmute for themselves at this point. If you want to just go ahead and say declare victory, we're done. If anyone wants to talk about why they think that's the best option, why don't you jump in now? Or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. I guess I should ask Mary or Guadalupe, do either one of you want to like make an argument for why really the answer is just we're done?
Well, I'll say, you know, I suggested one or two. And so, you know, one, because I think we've done a lot of really great work. And at this point, I don't see the need for continuing that work, especially at the level that we have been operating at. But I also put two out there because the situation may change in the next quarter. And that's the reason I do like two, and the opportunity for us to come back together quarterly to assess where we are and determine if something different is needed at that point.
I picked one and maybe I misread it, but I was like, okay, we have some recommendations. Let's put some teeth to it. And what are we doing? Like, what's the strategy to really advance those, right? Like talking about like, yeah, we can send them to our local reps, but like, what about like media and making it public and really getting support to make those a reality? So I may have misread. I'm not saying that the work is done. I'm actually saying it's not done because
it's not done. Well, right at this stage of the game, LIST doesn't have the resources to keep moving it forward. So if that's what people want to do, it really becomes a question of who wants to take up the leadership on that and move it forward. A couple more people who are voting for two. Anna, Cynthia, anyone want to jump in? Francis?
This is Cynthia Colbert. I mean, when we joined the housing task force, it was intended, we understood it was going to be time limited, and we've achieved the goals set out at the beginning. And if there's further desire to work together in a different way or for different goals, I think that is a different, maybe a different group, or maybe a different structure. The housing task force achieved what I was recruited, what I understood my job to be on the, and yours to be, by coming up with the recommendations. And again, our goal was to come up with the recommendation, and we've gone beyond, actually. I think it was beyond just COVID. I think obviously this last set of policy recommendations could affect a lot of great change over time. So I personally think the work is done, and I'd be interested in quarterly meetings to maybe if we want to take action on something new or different. You know, if we take action on these recommendations at Catholic Charities through our government relations, we would do so along with the other partners that we already collaborate with in public policy. But I think the applaud today, or the recognition of what's been accomplished, is great. And if there's further work that people are interested in joining around, I think then that's a different structure, a different time commitment, and it could be even different people at the table to help advance those things. So I feel really good about what's happened. Yes, not everything's completed in terms of the recommendations being implemented, but that wasn't the charge to the task force. So I think that I think the role of the task force is complete. And that's my opinion.
So maybe I misspoke, but the task force is sunsetting. It's really a question now of some of the work that has begun and other people want to keep going. Why don't we have the remainder of this conversation then be about what work do people want to take up and how do they want to move forward? Not within the context of the task force. That is, Cynthia, you're right. I think people feel good about what we've done. From my perspective, watching it, I've been impressed with all you've come up with. It's really a question of the other pieces of work. So for the people that thought 3 or 4 were good options, do people want to share what they're thinking, what they might be willing to contribute to move it forward? I want to open the conversation up for that.
This is Curtis. I would think that each of the working groups may have had elements of their work that go beyond the scope of the task force. Certainly, the Landlord Property Stabilization Work Group has some of that, and there appears to be a consensus to move forward with that group around some of that work. But that's beyond the task force's work. I think the recommendations were kind of what we were to do. And I don't say this in a negative sense, because it sometimes is read that way, but I say, we've done it and we put it over to Transom, and there are others to run with it. And if there are those who want to monitor and follow up on that as a group, I think there are different ways to consider that. I know I've recommended to the executive director, and it will be brought up to the full body of the Houston Housing Collaborative, that there's some consideration on taking on some of this work, but in the context of that organization and its mission. And others have mentioned already that their respective organizations have some of this as their mission, but as a group or as a cross-sector body, I think that some consideration for reconstituting it in some way ought to be considered in the form of question 3 or 4. And that dialogue and that conversation, I think, should be had, because there were foundational elements in the community, in the housing market, that were revealed as being more problematic in the context of the pandemic. And we also saw it in the context of the winter storm. And there's some fundamental questions that have been re-energized for reconsideration in a cross-sectoral manner. And the way this group was constituted as a cross-sector group, Houston Housing Collaborative is a cross-sector group. There are others, and that conversation should be had. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Any other people who wrote down 3 or 4 who want to share ideas to the group about how some of this work can go forward? I also get that people are tired. They've been through a lot. There's a lot going on in Houston. So unless people sort of have more ideas they want to share, what we can do is, again, send out all these notes, let people know, other people who thought things would be interested. I think I think there's enough support for number 2 that next quarter, the group will come together and Stephen will, as a forum, to share ideas. And maybe that's the time when people want to have more of a conversation about how to take some of this work forward. But you're also all free to, you guys all have the lists, you all have the communication, and just, we're hoping, one of the goals of this whole project was to try and create some relationships and some networks. And we hope those move forward as time moves on and as more issues happen. Anything else you want to say, Stephen? Anything else you want to encourage?
No, I mean, I think we'll go ahead and just get something on the calendar for, probably sometime in late May, and sort of see what people have to share at that point. I mean, obviously everyone knows that a court declared the CDC moratorium unconstitutional. There are big questions about how that's going to play out. There are big questions about the bill that's moving through Congress as we speak, or is being read on the floor of Congress as we speak. I guess it's done reading it. So obviously a lot is going on, and we can just sort of see where people are at the end of May, beginning of June, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is Diana. I just wanted to confirm what I'm hearing, which is that list doesn't necessarily have funding to support this work in an ongoing way. So are you taking up this quarterly activity on a volunteer basis, or are we looking for somebody else to step up? And
Yeah, I mean, I think
just
our
there.
general sense, Diana, is, I mean, the logistics of just facilitating a meeting once a quarter, I don't think is overly burdensome for us. I think the burdensome part was really supporting all of the work groups and driving all of that. The much more limited, if people want to get together, and I think that also invites whether or not there wants to be a broadening of the tent, so to speak. I think we had constraints on the original membership because we were really a creature of the city and county leadership, to the extent that there's now a self-organized group that wants to continue working and thinking about these issues. I think there's no reason that we have to stay as limited as we have been in terms of who constitutes the group.
Got it. Thanks. Thanks for all of your work. I mean, just again, I know that everybody worked really hard in different ways and their own institutions and also as a collective here, but appreciate LISC and the LISC team that kind of stepped into a role in a time of crisis and experimented and took a big risk to bring this ragtag group together. And I think it wasn't always pretty or easy, but appreciated the persistence and the collaborative spirit and trying to make it work. I think we all recognize that it isn't easy and it is a lot of work. So just thanks so much for doing that.
Thank you, Diana.
Any other final thoughts before we close? Stephen, you want the last word?
No.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. This has been amazing. Good luck with everything. Take care.
Have a good afternoon and a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks.